Number of things are going on in the political landscape. As y'all can tell, I'm over at the Haytide Heritage Center where we've got a film festival going on that's not in the political landscape, but there are a number of things taking place and all along those lines. And we've got some amazing folks that'll talk about Kamala Harris, who apparently is spiking in the polls, and a number of other things that are going on as well. And of course, we've got people that are excited about the race, and there's even some talk, at least what I'm hearing from Rick, that J.D. Vance may be not the vice president. Maybe there'll be somebody else to be the vice president, and maybe they will go after Nikki Haley as the vice president on the Republican side. But I'm going to bring in one of the founders of the network, Kim Calhoun, as well as Rick Rosner, who brought this whole idea up and everything. And of course,
I didn't say they're gonna do that. I just said if they were smart, they'd do that. But they don't. Trump doesn't make the best strategic decisions.
that is very true. He doesn't make strategic decisions all that well and everything. One thing that I was going to bring up the last time, and I don't know people's thoughts around this, and I know there are folks, including Jimmy, maybe even you, Rick, that are big fans of public protests, but public protests can get you in all kinds of troubles. I know there were protests that were going on against they were pro-Palestine, and that was taking place recently, even in D.C., and even protests that have shut down, or at least they shut down earlier, the airplanes in Germany, because a lot of airplanes are not flying because there are a number of people that were doing environmental protests, and they were part of the climate activist community and all along those lines. So I don't know y'all's thoughts as to whether protests are.
I don't know that I'm a fan of public protests. I can just tell you that the public protests now over Israel-Gaza are generally less dangerous and disorderly than the protests I grew up with over the Vietnam War, which makes sense because the Vietnam War killed 50,000 Americans and sent millions of Americans through the draft over to Vietnam. So there was a personal stake in stuff. And yeah, they tore stuff up. So people who were like freaking out over these protests, I'm like, yeah, these aren't the worst things in the world.
These aren't anything, are they? I agree. I think that people need a platform to share opposition opinions. I think all too often you always hear just one side of a story and you overlook the other voice. And I think as long as you just keep it, intellectual in some ways, don't get out of hand or crazy, I think that it's worth having people, hey, we're not happy. We did a protest in Wilmington, Delaware. We did a protest with our signs saying just, we're not happy with what you're doing. And, it got the point across, the fact that we got that many people. So I think there's something to be said about protest.
I mean, if I were in high school or college, I would be there. But that's because when I was in high school and college, I would try to go someplace like at least 5 times a week where I might meet girls.
It always had something to do with girl.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not even just the protest. Sometimes it's weather, because I actually just had a call, because as y'all know, I've had diplomats come by, and I just had a call from one that was wanting to have a trip of folks. I think they were actually Iraqis and all along those lines, but they're here as part of a diplomacy trip, and they were trying to find something to do for the entire day because they just got canceled because of the rain. We're having rain here, so a number of events were canceled, so now they're trying to figure out something to do. So I sent them over to the museum, and maybe they're going to go visit the pollinators, which is the bees, and maybe they're going to go to a ball game, or there's some other activities that they might try to attend because they were trying to round up a last minute activity and all along those lines here in the Triangle, because this is the 3rd or 4th time that I've seen this group, and there's various groups of diplomats that are coming in, and this is a group of all young diplomats. So these are young people that are all like youngsters, I think under the college age, and all in that space. One of the other groups was more adult oriented because they even had some hip hop artists and everything, but sometimes they come and they're trying to find things to do, and unfortunately the weather can get in the way as well. So where climate can be an interesting issue that go on in that space and everything. So maybe they'll come up with an idea and all along those lines. But Sasha, you're here and everything. So what is your take on protests? Because definitely there have been a number of protests, even there in Canada. I know that it was the whole way that the truckers had a lot of activity earlier this year and everything. So, and I know that some of these protests, even the ones that were either pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, you have not been the biggest fan of. But what is your take on protesters, and do they still have a place in our society?
You have to distinguish between protests in the 60s against Vietnam War, when you're saying that 50,000 Americans are being killed, and more could be killed if the war wouldn't be stopped. And that issue affecting all Americans. And now we're coming to today's pro-Palestinian protests. Hey, how many Palestinians live in United States? Anybody knows that?
I know that the Arab population is about 1%. About three.
Arab population is not the same. Arab population, at least in the, I don't know, in the United States, but in the Middle East, Arab population absolutely despises Palestinians. They don't even treat them as a human beings. This is the third, probably even fourth class citizens. They don't allow them to move into their countries, whereas Saudi Arabia or any other, Egypt, so on. Egypt wouldn't accept even a single Palestinian during this last several months of war. They wouldn't accept even a single Palestinian. That's what it is. After the 6 Days War, it's Egypt who grabbed the Gaza, and it was Jordan who grabbed the West Bank. Israel had nothing to do with that. It's Jordan. And Egypt grabbed that, and they wouldn't allow the people who lived there to move into their proper Egypt and Jordan, not at all. So how come these protests were so well organized in United States when there are no Palestinians that we know of? There is no statistics. The Arabs, yes, there is 1% of Arab population, but they have nothing to do with the Palestinians. Then where, who, how these protests are being done? Anybody can answer.
I mean, what you're suggesting is that, there were paid operatives or.
Absolutely. There is no any other way except paying people money, get them there. I overheard even, I think it was in Columbia University, two girls, two protesters, and one asking another one, what are we protesting today against? So there are professional protesters who are making a living of joining all kinds of protests here and there.
But there are still people who spontaneously decide just based on reading the news. And some people who protest are going to be well informed. Some are going to have Palestinian relatives. Some people are going to be half informed. But I mean, the protests in general have been orderly. The last one where they spray painted a bunch of stuff, yeah, it's bad to spray paint stuff, but it's not the end of the world.
But what's the use of proper protests if they are not violent and if they are proper? So why anybody would pay any money for this type of protests?
I mean,
the idea is to make them violent. That's why people pay money to these girls and other protesters to become violent. So then they can bring attention to the cause, whatever it might be, and that's how it all works. And America, Netanyahu was right when he was saying that the Americans who are supporting enemies of Israel and enemies of America, because the barbarians who started these attacks on October 7th, they were against Israel and against its ally, United States. So these protesters are actually against both America and Israel. And why would Americans tolerate this garbage? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. I know where you're coming from, where people have, even here when they were doing riots, they said that people were actually paying people, protest. There were people doing protests, but they were paying people to come in and disturb the protest by making them riot. And it's a system. They have it down to a system, and they have bricks, and they have all the things you need to disturb a protest. And I think if they catch those people, they need to be punished, because majority of the protesters that I'm aware of, I mean, they might get riled up a little bit, but majority of them just want their voice heard, right? They just want to be not just heard, but accepted. Okay, we've heard you. Let's talk about it. You know,
Well, I've got a question for Sasha, which is, most of Hamas, most of the people in Hamas have been killed. They started off with, I don't know, 25 to 30,000 members. They're down to under 10,000. So do you see an end to the Israeli offensive in the next few months?
I think that it's not that all those remaining, whatever it's 10,000 or whatever it might be, have to be absolutely physically exterminated. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that they're supposed to stop to be a political entity. What Netanyahu said yesterday, that he would accept any type of government in Palestine, in Gaza, for example, as long as it's not anti-Israeli, as long as they will stop teach kids in school how to kill Israelis. So that would be returning to normalcy. And it would be, for example, could be several Arab states in the region who can provide interim government or subsidies, because Israel is not going to govern Gaza. All
Can you get an Arab state to come in and provide government? I mean,
well, it's another question. It's another question. I think if they are supporting Palestinians so much and demand that Israel will stop this attacks against Gaza and so on, so at least they have to come forward and say, yes, okay, in case of the peace in Gaza, we are prepared to help to provide a governing coalition. I would expect that as a very reasonable outcome of this.
well, isn't there gonna need to be an occupation? Israel tried occupying Gaza, I don't know how long ago, but they only had 9,000 Israelis in Gaza. It wasn't enough. How do you govern Gaza without an occupation?
Well, first of all, remember when I started this, the Gaza was occupied by Egypt for many years, and it didn't stop attacks of the terrorists against Israel. And in fact, there are many tunnels leading to Egypt, and from Egypt, the weapons were delivered to Gaza and used for attacks. Okay, so now the whole purpose of liquidating Hamas, whether it's physically killing all these fighters or they would give up and release the hostages, one of the outcomes that Hamas is no longer a military force, no longer governing force. So somebody has to help Palestinians to start governing. When you are talking about two-state solution, there is one state, Israel, that doesn't need anybody's help. Here is a state of Israel. Full stop, period. Where is the second state, the Palestinian state?
So, I mean, you don't need just governance, you need somebody to administer the rebuilding of all of Gaza, where, I don't know, 80% of buildings, 90% have been destroyed.
And Yeah, I know that.
So I mean, so you need a ton of people now, like I mean, the Gazans, I'm sure, can do the rebuilding, but somebody has to administer it. Is it going to be all Gazans, or I mean, that place is going to need like $20 billion worth of aid from neighboring countries and maybe the U.S. to rebuild everything.
Yeah, most likely.
All right. Do you want to move on from this to the polls of Kamala Harris versus Trump? Because
Sure.
new polls are coming out and they're all over the place. There's a
Let's talk about them. That's pretty. I mean, this is exciting. It's exciting because up until now, everyone from you guys need to get rid of Biden. He just needs to go. He needs to go. And now we got rid of him, and I think they're a little bit scared.
What's clear, I think, not super clear, but what seems to make sense is that Harris will do better than Biden would have against Trump. That she's the first charismatic candidate we've had since Obama. I mean, Trump people say, well, Trump, he's a TV star, but he's got huge negatives and he looks like crap. He's got a horrible record. But this was going to be the third consecutive election where each candidate had huge negatives and, was just not that appealing.
The negatives that people come up for Kamala, they don't realize they're, throwing stones because they're the same shame they should be shaming Trump for. They're the same things. But I mean, this is just one poll I found today, which I thought was interesting because they were talking about, and again, it depends on where you get the information from.
What does it say and who's it from? I can't.
It's Axis, and what they were talking about, there was a whole but what they were talking about was the youth and how the youth has turned around and is starting to show more interest. And so this was more based on the polls when Biden and Trump were running. And now they're showing a difference when Kamala came on. They felt like that they've seen a larger interest in the youth who can vote, who are registered to vote, are very excited. They've also said that several Democrats have pivoted because they're not happy with J.D. Vance. So this was showing a piece of that. But this was more about the youth. But I know that there are other polls. This was just one that caught my eye because I haven't seen one that big. I did get a call from someone who said their parents who watch all of this way up in the Midwest northern area or go, oh my God, she's got 85% lead. And I'm like, send me that poll. I want to see it. But it's good news, right? It's healthy. We don't have somebody who looks sick all the time. Okay, hear me out on this. This is something I do want to say about Biden that nobody ever gives him credit for. Steve did a good job the other day, but a lot of people don't realize that he enacted the very first law to protect women of domestic violence. Back in 1993, he stood against every man up there and he plowed through everybody and he wrote the law and he stood on it and he got it passed through. He did not let it die. Now, granted, it needed a lot of work, but he got it passed through and nobody really cared. After that, over the years, he got it adjusted. He never left it. That's how passionate he was about women and children in domestic violence. Now, later you adjust it for the men too, but there were, growing in numbers when I got involved in 2016, 15 timeframe. You're looking at 12 million women a year, and nobody was really pushing except Joe Biden. And then when they had got funding for the domestic violent funds to help protect people, to really start trying to enforce the protective orders, and he kept pushing it and kept it alive. Obama signed it. We get to Trump to keep the funding going, and he dismantled it completely. He also dismantled the CFPB, which was to protect consumers in financial situations. So, and that was to protect his timeshare properties because they were all being investigated at the time for fraud, and mostly fraud against consumers because the CFPB was investigating them. And when Trump got into office, he dismantled them right away. So, I think that, Biden did a lot that the people don't really give him enough respect for. And I think the one against victims of violence was a big one. So, but, here we are with Kamala, who takes law enforcement very serious.
She has 27 years of experience in law enforcement.
Right.
14 years as an assistant or deputy DA, 7 years as the San Francisco DA, and then 6 years as California's Attorney General.
Right. Right. I mean, and so that speaks loud to me that I think she will know how to control the border. She will know how to stop the catch and release because she didn't like it. I mean, she will put an end to a lot of things.
Well, I mean, for anything significant to happen on the border, you need to have a majority in the House and the Senate. Because we saw that, they came to a border deal and Trump scuttled it. And, if she wins, Trump might go away, but the opposition, the Republican, this really got well, a lot of it started under Newt Gingrich, just being oppositional to make the other party look bad. But it got really bad under McConnell, who said, we're not going to give Obama a single victory. We're going to push back against everything. And that's going to continue to be the way politics is done.
Well, remember one of the reasons, and probably the main reason I would say, that Trump is running for president is to avoid jail, is to finish his all legal troubles. And it's include criminal trials, it includes the civil trials where he is liable for hundreds of millions of dollars or so on. So this is not the work to make American life easier or better or healthier or more prosperous. It's not his goal. His goal is to avoid jail. And if he will be successful, then not only he will avoid the jail, but he will remake complete society of the United States. And in fact, I think that this election, if he wins, that's going to be last election. There will be no more elections. He will definitely having complete immunity. He will be able to change the laws. This is why I thought that Biden now, when he has complete immunity, and because it's his last term anyway, regardless who wins the election, he could now do a lot of drastic things without having any responsibilities, simply because of the immunity factor. If you want a list of what he could do, I can provide the list.
But Biden is an institutionalist. He's been in government for 50 years, and he likes reasonable, sane governance. So he's not going to try a bunch of crazy stuff.
You know what? I think he should sober up to the fact that the moment Trump will become a president, he will lock Biden and his children and Kamala and many, many, many people. He will lock them up without even access to the lawsuits or any legal procedures or anything. Just lock up.
And I think you're right, because no matter what, in every interview they have done, including the debate, they'll ask him not once, twice, sometimes three times, because he dances around it. You know how he starts to ramble on and he dances around it. But there was one woman, I'm going to have to find it, but she looked at him and she goes, I want you to hear this question. You're not listening. Will you, you keep talking retribution. Will you go after the people that you don't like when you make president? And he goes, well, the way they've treated me, I have every right to do that.
But I think he told directly to Joe Biden that I will lock you to prison the moment I will become president. I think
he has. He has.
He just said it.
But even in the debate, they asked a question, about, are you going to be a sore loser? They didn't say it that way, but, what's going to happen? And, he says, well, he dances around it. And they asked twice, well, you didn't answer the question. So I think what he does is he knows how to evade the answers and he's going to say what the people he wants to hear. But then when we get there and people say, well, you said you weren't. No, he goes, no, I never said that. I never said that. I said this, that, and the other. But people don't see that in him. They see the words that come out of his mouth, but they don't see that he's tap dancing around these very concerning issues.
So
and that's retribution.
He initially ran for president out of anger and vengeance because at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, I don't know, around 2013, 2014, Trump had been pushing birtherism, which is that Obama wasn't really a U.S. citizen and we need to see his real birth certificate. And at this White House, Correspondents' Dinner, Obama made fun of him, and the comedian Seth Meyers told a lot of jokes at Trump's expense.
Yeah, they did.
And it pissed him off. He talked about running for president before, but that was the precipitating event that led him to run. So he wanted to run, and he wanted to undo everything Obama did. It was there was no vision for America. It was just an FU to the people who made fun of him.
So I don't understand what's the scrutiny process of Republican Party that would allow somebody like Trump to be considered as a nominee when they
he started winning primaries.
Hold on, who allowed him even to get to primaries? What's the process? So
money. No, there is no process. It's money. It's all money. Anytime you hear anyone talk now about what it takes to campaign, what gets you in, everything is about the money.
I agree.
Nothing's about the people anymore. Everything's
but the money alone cannot bring you on stage when there were 17 people.
Right. So I assume it was polling. I don't know for sure, but in 2015, he announces he's running, and then they do polls of all the prospective candidates. And like you said, there were more than a dozen candidates, and he polled enough to get on the ballot in the first few primaries. He got $4 billion in free media coverage because he said a bunch of crazy crap. He said that Mexicans are rapists and murderers. And he got a lot of attention because he didn't talk carefully like most politicians. And he had celebrity. And then he started winning. He insulted his, Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and all his opponents, and people liked it. Not most Americans, but enough Republicans that he got the nomination.
Yep.
But Republicans were fighting him for the very last moment. I think the last one was to go with Ted Cruz. But even before, when there was still Jeb Bush was still there and so on, they were all fighting him because he was not a standard bearer for the Republican Party at all. He has nothing even, he doesn't even understand what the Republican Party stands for. And they all had to one by one get out of the race.
Yeah, well, they fought him. I think they should have fought him literally. I deplore political violence, but I think Jeb Bush Trump insulted him, insulted his wife, Ted Cruz. Trump said his wife is ugly. He said his dad assassinated JFK. If somebody had
And
taken
Little Rubio, remember Little Rubio?
yeah, if somebody had just punched him in the face, I think he would have tumbled over on his fat ass, and
Yes.
I think his momentum would be gone.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree. He's a bully. And I think the blue collar workers, the hardworking people, just wanted to hear a person stand up for them. And that's what he was doing. But what they have little knowledge of is he didn't really do anything for them. He didn't do anything. And all of this problem that we're swimming in right now, the high gas rates and everything, that had nothing to do with Biden. That had everything to do with the oil executives and all the prices that we're paying right now. All of that was a cleanup mess from COVID. Okay. It had, any president would have had to walk into this mess with galoshes waist high because there was a mess to be cleaned up. And
But
it's
let's
not
talk
gonna be
about the
cleaned up.
mess in 2016. That there are issues that nobody talks about because they don't have a solution. And
Right.
the issues that pissed off Republicans to the point that they picked Trump to get vengeance on their behalf. A lot of those are real issues, like job losses. But the job losses and the crapification of jobs where people are driving Uber or DoorDash, those are fake jobs that don't really pay very well. And it's technological disruption that's created a lot of the pressure on Americans. And neither party has a solution for that. So neither party talks about it. And each party blames the other party for, any kind of crappy job situation. And that disgruntlement, got Trump elected.
Right. Well, I think now I would like to know how we think the electoral votes are going to be impacted with all of this. That we've got a lot of changes that are being addressed now, and people are hearing our new voice of opportunity in our country. And I think it's resonating. I don't think people want a woman for president. People still have this really slow mindset that a woman is not going to be strong enough to be able to deal with the foreign affairs. And I think she'll be able to handle them very well. I don't think that she will be lacking in any skills to deal with anyone in foreign affairs. In fact, I think being a woman, she'll be able to open up doors that even Trump couldn't open, just because I think people are going to be curious.
So, I mean, it's as everybody's saying, it's down to 7 swing states. Trump can't win the popular vote. The first time he lost by almost 3 million, the last time by 7 million. And he can't even lose by 3 million because we've seen what he's done, which is a lot of terrible stuff. So he might lose by 5 million if the election were held next month. And that might still not be enough for him to lose the swing states.
I mean, it might not be, but I think that she's going to give him a run for his money. And I think her speech was enough to shake him up. I think it really shook the rafters. I don't think they were expecting for her to come out swinging like that. And I thought it was beautiful.
It could have been expected. You know why? I just went another day on YouTube to see your questioning of the Kavanaugh, the Bill Barr, what else I saw? Oh, Jim Sessions. Look, she is formidable opponent, and I think she's a formidable debater. And I think Trump will have very, very difficult time against her. She's not even like Clinton, because when Trump was stalking her and moving like physically on her, and she was like moving away from him. With Kamala Harris, she will tell him, "You idiot, stay where you are, just right there. to
You're
make
under arrest.
people punch
It'll be interesting to see him on stage together because he's a foot taller
It'd be
than
fun to
he
watch
is.
her in office. Go ahead, Rick.
Seeing them on stage is going to be a little weird because he claims to be 6'3". He's got lifts in his shoes. She's 5'2". Now she wears super high heels, so she doesn't look that short, but he's much more physically imposing. And yeah, he lurked behind Hillary, and her people and she are aware of that, and they're going to come up with tactics that if he tries that, she'll be like, get the F over there, you weird creep.
Yeah, maybe that's why he didn't want anyone to see his shoes when he got shot, because maybe he's
maybe it was, I saw a picture, it might have been photoshopped of his shoes flying off. It must have been, now that I think about it, because you could
The
see
shoes flew off. That's why he wanted to get his shoes and everything. Hey, I got a question for you, Rick, and everything. California Governor Gavin Newsom has ordered state agencies today to remove homeless encampments on state land. And I'm just wondering your take on that, because apparently this is after the Supreme Court ruling allowed the cities to enforce bans on sleeping outside in public spaces. So, Newsom at one time was seen as a gubernatorial and even a presidential candidate. So what is our take as a political landscape of this notion of kicking the folks off of their land that apparently are living there? Because apparently California is home to roughly 1/3 of the nation's population of homeless people. So there are a whole lot of homeless people there in California.
LA County has at least 73,000 homeless people. I don't know which is second to New York City. They've got to go someplace. There's no good solution. California's been trying, and LA have been trying to turn hotels, derelict hotels, into housing. We're doing these tiny houses, which are 8 foot by 8 foot sheds, and they end up being way more expensive than you think. It runs $100,000 for every homeless person you come up with housing for. I don't know whatever they're going to try is not going to work because there are too many people. Eventually, maybe a bunch of combined solutions will reduce the problem, but it's not going away soon.
In Toronto, there are nice shelters for homeless people simply because of the climate issues. Although climate is getting warmer and warmer each year, but still, the winter is a winter. And believe it or not, half of them are empty. Homeless people refuse to be in shelter, live in some kind of a more or less civilized way of life. They just like what they like. They just like to be where they are. They feel that it's complete freedom. They don't have to report to anybody. They can do anything what they want. I don't know how you find that approach.
When I go out, one of the things I look at in every city now is the homeless situation. I've been to San Francisco this year. It did not look as bad as it normally does. Actually, the last few times I've been there, it looks pretty good. I've been to Denver, Colorado. I think everybody looks like they're camping to me, so I didn't notice. But the two worst places that really just bothered me was Asheville, North Carolina. When you went to the center of the town, which is normally a gorgeous place, there are hundreds of people huddled in Asheville, North Carolina, homeless. I thought it was a party. I literally thought there was going to be a party there. And I said, come on, let's go. And when I got there, I realized it was just homeless people looking for food, and it was hundreds. And then the other place that really concerned me was Houston, Texas. Now, I've been going there for years for the World Leaders Meeting, been staying at the same kind of hotel, same district for forever. You walk out, you go. Rarely did I ever see a homeless. The homeless were cluttered so thick along the street, they had to close one of the businesses permanently. And the hotel that I was at literally had a guard that would stand at the door and keep the pathway clear. So when your car dropped you off, you had a clear pathway. That's how thick and bad it was. And I am not making this up. I should have taken photos of it, but I almost felt bad for the people. Like I just didn't want to take their dignity away any more than what it had been by taking a photo of how miserable it was. Miserable. I was. In fact, I don't ever want to go back there again. Ever. And not long after that, I heard a report that Houston got ranked the filthiest city in the world.
So Houston is one of the world's most interesting cities from a science fiction perspective. It's right on the ocean. It gets flooded. It gets hot. I read a novel by Neil Stevenson set in the near future where the whole plot is kicked off because a plane couldn't land in Houston because it was too hot that it couldn't support the plane upon landing because it was 125 degrees. You know, Houston's spread out. It's a modern city, and it's got the oil. So yeah, the way Houston goes, the rest of America goes. Now, LA has 4 years to solve its homeless problem because we have the Olympics coming in 2028. And there's no way that the people who run the city and the Olympics will let there be tens of thousands of homeless people on the street for the Olympics. So watch us to see what we figure out to do.
Well, there's something to be said about that, but I kind of want to switch something back to let's talk about what if, Kamala does win. Should Trump run to Canada and hide?
Well, he might run to Canada, and maybe he'll be the neighbor to Sasha and everything. But I did have a question for Sasha along those same lines, because something that Sasha has brought up on several shows is this notion of Russia claiming back Alaska. He's brought that up jokingly a couple of times, and apparently China and Russia staged their first joint bomber patrol near Alaska. So do we need to worry about this, Sasha? Because apparently they got together and they did a joint patrol of bombers near Alaska. So do we need to worry about them coming over to Alaska, Sasha? Because you brought this up a couple of times, and this just happened literally earlier today.
Here we come again. All these games were played 50, 70 years ago during the Cold War. There was nothing new. The Soviet planes were circling around American targets, and Americans bring up their fighter jets, and so Russians would go away, and then what Americans would do exactly the same thing, and Russians would bring their fighter jet, so Americans would go away. That game was being played for actually not even years, but dozens of years, actually generations, you can say. So there is nothing serious about that, and what's happened is that maybe very few people know that American two B-52s, they were flying all the way from the base in the United States all the way to Europe, circled near St. Petersburg, and then they landed in Romania. So I don't think that Russians were very happy about this development, but again, it's neither here nor there. What can you do about it?
Well, so I have a question about Russia for Sasha, which is, it seems to me that there were opportunities to do dollar diplomacy at certain points in the history of the Soviet Union and now Russia, and maybe in the future, because Russia's going to be fairly broke after this war is done. Is it possible for the U.S. to set up economic alliances with Russia to get them to behave better? Now, one more thing. America and Russia each have about 1,700 deployable nuclear weapons. Could we pay Russia to make a nuclear deal where we knock that number in half? We each reduce our nuclear arsenal to under 1,000.
The answer is no. I'll tell you why. The opportunity was in the early 1990s when Soviet Union collapsed in December of 1991, and by 1992, the beginning of the year, the Russia was so poor that you could probably cut all the nuclear arsenal for a song. The Bush Senior missed the opportunity. I think he was he's probably level of fantasy.
Right, we got some weird noise coming in here.
Sorry?
There's some weird noise playing in the background somewhere here. But anyway, oh,
Not on my part.
all right. Just talk a little louder if you could, please.
Yeah, okay. So this opportunity was nothing of the union between Russia and US. We cannot even discuss it because they're on so different levels that there is nothing even to discuss. So at that time, there was an opportunity. Today's situation is very different. First of all, Russian oligarchs and Putin himself, he's considered to be the wealthiest person in the world. Nobody counted exactly his money, but it's so much that nobody can't even do it because his wealth is absolutely astronomical. So when you discuss the business arrangements, you're not discussing with the people on the street who are incredibly poor and would agree to almost anything. You will discuss it with Putin and his cronies, and they have more money than Elon Musk and all these American so-called oligarchs put together. So therefore, any financial deal with Russian top people is simply impossible. And don't forget, just in case, the American debt of $35 trillion are going on. So I don't see any financial deal possible with Russia.
Okay.
Russia understands only one thing is the power. As long as you will apply the power, you can handle Russia. If you cannot apply the power, just go back to your apartment and stay there and pray. That's all.
So that should lead to us discussing Kamala Harris if she becomes president. I don't know that she has a lot of experience in foreign relations. Bush has had maybe, I mean, not Bush, Biden has maybe more background in foreign relations than any other president because he headed the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's been to Israel 11 times. He's been around for frickin' forever. But Harris, not so much. So how does she handle things?
I think she has to find her own way, her own foreign policy. She's a very smart woman, and she's well equipped to formulate her own foreign policy. What Biden did in his foreign policy, he is an institutionalist, he is a corporate man. So what he was trying is to keep the balance. So whenever Ukraine needed arms and assistance, he provided it a little bit here and then a few months later a little bit there. So he was providing almost, when a person is hungry and you feed him just one piece of bread a day, that's enough for him not to die, but it's not enough for him to regain his weight and his strength. It's not enough. And that's what Biden did with Ukraine. It's exhausted Ukraine. It led to hundreds, if not thousands, of people, Ukrainian soldiers, be dead. Same as children, same as people. Why? Because he was scared to upset the balance of power. That's what his policy. Even so, that the Congress, believe it or not, finally, I think it was exactly April 24th. Finally, they released $61 billion for Ukraine. Now, today, it's almost 3 months later. You know how much of this amount was released actually to Ukraine? $1.2 billion. So $60 billion are still sitting there, and Biden has all authority to use it for helping Ukraine, and he killed it. That's what Biden is. And I think that Kamala would be smart enough to figure out her own way, not to follow what Biden was doing.
So do we have to worry about, say that we really provide everything Ukraine wants, then do we have to worry that Putin sets off a tactical nuke? And there's really no such thing as a tactical nuke. You set off a nuclear weapon, and it's, there's no such thing as a small nuclear explosion.
I'll give you another proposal. Putin can do it anyway. Let's see, US will continue to withhold the funds from Ukraine. And Putin will unleash, because he cannot get anywhere on a battlefield, because Europe is supplying now Ukraine a great deal of all weapons and financial help. They just released another $150 billion for Ukraine. So Ukraine will hold its own without US. And Putin, let's see, will release his so-called tactical nuclear arms. Although he was warned by everybody in the world, including China and Iran and US and Europe and everybody else. He was warned. And let's see, he still does it. So it's not because America helped Ukraine. No, it's just because he felt like doing that. And what are you going to do?
Any other topics for the last 6 minutes?
No, I mean, I think we've covered a lot, and I know that it's going to be interesting to watch Kamala come in and see what she's going to do on all of these things that people have been arguing about for so long, and maybe she'll just get them done. But you know what I think that we've really failed to understand, even though he's still probably very sick, is now Biden's free to just kind of work things through while she campaigns.
And
He's not worried anymore.
He has immunity.
And he
Biden
has
has
immunity.
That's
Except that if Trump wins, he better run. But I do feel that this can maybe allow him to get some things accomplished. And I think that that is a good thing. I think it's good when a person can finish up their term able to work and focus on work instead of campaigning. I hate campaigning year. To me, nobody has 4 years. Nobody. They campaign the last year, and the first year they're in, they're just getting settled in and fighting sore losers. So, I mean, maybe that won't happen this time.
What specifically can he do? He tried to get rid of student debt. It keeps getting overturned by the court. He could do an executive order banning sales of new AR-15s, AK-47s. Would that stand? I don't know. Probably not.
But he could throw some monkey wrenches into some of those things. But now he's got more time to focus on that instead of exhausting himself for the next few months. I mean, if you think about it, he's got until through January. So I think the man got a lot accomplished when he first got in the office. He didn't dance around. He didn't do a lot of celebrating. I'm sure he did internally, but he went straight to work. And a lot of people don't do that. So I think he's going to go straight to work. I mean, when you look at what he got done when he was a senator, getting that law passed for victims, I mean, that was huge. Nobody ever gives him credit for that.
Years ago, Kim, it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, but I think he still has.
He doesn't have balls. To be great president, you must have balls. And men without balls cannot be a great president.
I mean, can he stop one of the wars right now? I mean, maybe he can. I don't know.
It doesn't matter. He could stop wars a long time ago if he would help Ukraine. Really, Ukrainians would get the Russians out of their country in a matter of a few months. And that would stop the war right there.
I think if he had been tougher in the beginning, I think that a lot of the wars would have not escalated to the point that they had.
But I think he's very inconsistent in what he's doing. So when the attack happened on Israel, October 7th, he sent two the carrier groups to region, right? So he was completely on the Israeli side. He completely, essentially, he even um, let know Israel that if they would need to attack Iran, U.S. is there to help it. So he was all the way pro-Israeli in the first few weeks of that, and then all of a sudden he changed. Well, because of these protesters, because of these little protesters, the stupid idiots, motherfuckers, he completely changed his stance, and he became anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish, anti-everything. And I don't know what's happened today on his meeting with Netanyahu, but it's completely changed. Now the old man, 80 years old, if he would have balls, would he ever do what he done? Absolutely not. So enough of Biden.
I think, yeah, but I do hope that while she's campaigning, maybe he lays out the path that she needs to secure. I
Hopefully,
think maybe he still has this to engineer. I watch a lot of people that are older just because they are moving slower and not as healthy doesn't mean this still doesn't work. So I think now that he can sit back and relax a little bit, there's no pressure. Maybe he can pave that. Maybe he can give her the balls she needs to go after them because
that would be a good
I
way.
don't know what her foreign policy background will be, but I feel like that if he coaches her, she will carry it and maybe she can do it, you know?
He could do it on her own and much better than both
All right.
Biden.
Well, I just looked at two articles on what Biden can do in his last 6 months. He can appoint judges, but he's still dependent on the House and the Senate to confirm them. He's appointed a ton of judges, 200, so he can get a few more in there. And then this other article talked about Supreme Court reform. I don't know what he can do through executive orders to reform the Supreme Court.
That would be interesting. And you know what? That could be a good topic for next week. Until then, everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy and wealthy, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.
Bye.
This is
Bye-bye.
cool.